All right, I think we'll officially call the meeting to order, Steve. It's a
Sounds
little
good.
after 7. Is there any public participation? I don't see a name I don't recognize, but is there any public participation? Seeing none. We have a lengthy agenda tonight, a number of budgets, and we'll get into that. Basically, I think Kevin will give a synopsis or his rundown of the budget, and the budget itself won't go up on the screen or anything like that. I assume you were all able to get the shared link I gave you. Did that work all right for people? Okay. So with that, we have minutes, October 29th minutes. That was also sent to you in a separate email, which was the last meeting we had in the fall. Is there any comments on the minutes from 10/29/20?
No, this is Dan. I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion by Dan to approve the minutes as written and seconded by Joe. Any discussion? All right, is anybody opposed to accepting the minutes? I'll assume it's unanimous if no one is opposed. All in favor of the minutes for 10/29, Steve?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So there was a forecasting subcommittee meeting, and that is the next item on the agenda is the forecast comments. Steve, I don't know if you want to comment. Do you want the subcommittee to kind of go over their stuff first? Whatever you.
I guess if we could maybe approve their minutes first, and then we can go to comments, just so I don't screw up the minutes later on.
Okay, so the finance subcommittee met on January 14th, 21. There were minutes also sent to you for review and approval. Now, obviously, many of you were not there. So
It really just should be the subcommittee.
those that were there
I'll move it.
need to review and then make a motion on those minutes as you see them.
Jim, I'll move approval.
Okay, moved approval by Gerard, second
Second,
by,
Evan.
Oh, no, Evan,
No,
you weren't
it's-
there.
I'll second. I was there.
Okay.
there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion on said minutes? All right, those in the subcommittee, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, aye.
Anybody opposed?
Thank you.
Very good, unanimous. So the rest of the committee, hopefully you had a chance to read some of the discussion that went on in that meeting. And then either Steve, you can give us a high overview, or the finance subcommittee can speak to it as well.
Okay, I think basically as one of the things that we, basically I think we're pretty much on track for what we thought before, with maybe some areas that we were pleasantly surprised in. You know, we reviewed the actual revenues for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And I don't know if the whole committee got that. If not, I apologize. We'll make sure we can send that around. But the subcommittee did. Tax collections are on target, and the local receipts are pretty much on target to you know, meet our budgeted amount, or our forecasted amount of 6.25 million. They may actually come a little higher than that if we're lucky. Noting that we have a $3 million local excise tax commitment that will be in the spring or the second half of fiscal year 21. It was also noted that state revenue has increased over last fiscal year for the first 6 months by 2.7%. Governor Baker must see it a little bit better than I did on the numbers. And he actually in his first budget that he sent up fiscal year 22 is increasing our unrestricted local aid by 3.5%. I sent that around to, I think, the chair and the vice chair, so they can send that around if they wish, to everybody in the first cherry sheet that came out from the federal government. So we thought that we were basically on schedule for what we had, and expenses were pretty much the same. As far as CARES and FEMA reimbursements are concerned, the FEMA reimbursements have been, or allowable expenses through December 31st, 2021 are now allowable. That's a change that came in the latest stimulus bill. And we are actually expecting more from President Biden in that regard. In fact, the costs of our clinic, vaccination clinic, which I really don't want to talk to, spend too much time talking about that the last few days, just ask Kevin. 100% of those costs will be FEMA reimbursable. So that's a little bit of a change there. And we can talk about that, which is, you know, as opposed to 75. All in all, we felt pretty comfortable where we have forecasted. I was a little bit disappointed in the recent cherry sheet because I thought that Chapter 70 aid, the increase of that was woeful, in my opinion, around 1.5%. And if there's this great Student Opportunities Act coming out, I think I'd like to see a little bit of money in it. Our Chapter 70 aid was increased over last fiscal year by about $110,000 or so. That's still early, but I was disappointed in that. One thing that Joanne requested was an analysis of revenues and expenses from April 2020 to present as a comparison, and we will give you that too, kind of COVID to COVID. So we'll be putting that together for Joanne. But I do appreciate the time of the forecasting subcommittee. We played a little bit with Dan's spreadsheet because it's much better than mine. Although I do go from my crappy one to see what's going on. But we did feel that perhaps, you know, with a little bit extra money coming in this year than we had anticipated, and with departments maybe returning a little bit, our free cash going forward will actually be a little bit better than we had the dire straits we talked about in the beginning of the year. So all in all, we are cautiously optimistic. I don't know if Dan has a different take, but that's pretty much how I feel.
Yeah, given the new information from the state, I went ahead and plugged the cherry sheets and the governor's proposed local aid into the spreadsheet. I tweaked the local receipts up to 6.9 million based on the discussions we had, and adjusted a couple different things. One difference we should note is that I'm leaving the school department budget at an increase of 4.88%, and Steve has it at 4. Doug had mentioned, he said, what about the contracts? And I agree with Doug. We're leaving it at 4.88 because I just don't see them getting down to 4. But even with that, my forecast right now, given those changes and the budgets we're going to discuss tonight, it looks like our free cash will get down to about $3 million in 2025, 2026, and then start going back up again. So I am cautiously optimistic that we're going to weather this storm at this point. So I'm just echoing Steve's comment that numbers are holding up so far.
Yeah.
Any other members of the subcommittee, additional comments? Okay, the spreadsheet Dan refers to is the intricate spreadsheet of expenses and income. I think you've all seen a copy of it. If you haven't, periodically, you know, throughout this year, I'll ask Dan as he's updating it to send it along. You know, you can work your own what ifs and et cetera. But generally, most of the budgets were budgeted at what number, Steve? Was it a little over 3 and change or something? Or
are you talking about the town side budgets, or I mean, I would like to bring in the entire town side, the municipal side, at around 3%, and
Right.
As an aggregate, and the schools, I had in at 4 because Dan is much more generous than I am. He has a
I just don't think they can get down to 4.
I don't know how that happens, but that's okay.
No, it's their contract. They've got a 3-year contract. It's not happening.
year to year, Steve, it's like a sine wave, you know.
So,
So,
you know,
Anyway, that's just kind of the backdrop. So, Steve says trying to get town budgets in around 3% overall.
Yeah.
School budget will be higher than that. And
So I had the entire operating accounts coming in at about 3.75 in that area, taking into account the schools in the town side. Just for, budgeting.
it's a reference. It's a point. All right. So that's exactly. Any other comments? So the forecast is a little better. It's not great, but a little better, I think is the overall, correct?
I would say so.
Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously, that's the right term.
Right. And as you know, the governor's budget isn't necessarily the finished budget. So it'll take its course, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it'll be going through. I mean, I don't know, maybe Gerard has more information on this than I do, but I did read the lead story, one of the lead stories in the item tonight, about $130,000 extra in Chapter 70 money. I don't know where that's coming from. Is that extra on top of the governor's budget? Is that money this year? So I don't know if, I don't know where that number was coming from. So I don't know if Gerard, have you heard any of that from the school department?
No, not yet. So actually Doug and I had our most recent back and forth this morning. We were going to try to get together this week or late last week, but after the unfortunate events with one of their staff, we kind of deferred. So I'm probably a week behind where I wanted to be with meeting with Doug and then bringing the subcommittee on. So hopefully, Dan, I can get you a sharper initial number next week. And then the more substantive committee interactions will happen shortly thereafter. So that's the plan so far. So unfortunately, nothing more responsive at this time, Steve.
Okay, nope, I mean, no problem.
All right. So with that, if there's any other comments on that subject, we'll move forward with the subcommittee comments on the budgets that we're going to see tonight.
I guess that would be Evan. Evan is.
Evan, I think you're chair on that one.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We have overall, and I'm going to do my best to maximize everybody's time here in terms of efficiency. We had a good group, I think, between Trey and Dawn and myself and Steve and Kevin went over this stuff. You're looking at a pretty benign set of budgets here, bottom line incremental increase of 1.35%. We got some help from items like elections. And we had a good discussion. I think it was about an hour long to go through all these budgets, which I thought was pretty good. Overall, as much as I've made sarcastic comments to Steve about his COLA increases, that's pretty much the bulk of it. And as much as I unsarcastically have some reservations about a 3% COLA in economic times like this, it's hard to criticize him when I look across the town and look at the contracts that Dan just mentioned in the school department. And Steve's hitting some pretty reasonable goals here. So overall, those are my thoughts. I would certainly defer to Teray and Dawn on their individual thoughts as we go through these budgets, if the chairman would indulge, if they want to repeat some of the concerns they had in the subcommittee meeting and the ways that those may have been resolved, I would encourage them to speak up. And other than that, I would defer back to you, Mr. Chairman, and however you'd like to proceed.
Can I add one thing,
Yep.
Jim, on this? Just so we have apples to apples. In the last few years, particularly last year, whenever we had we're reviewing budgets and whenever there was a group that had not had their contract settled for the next fiscal year, I would always make the caveat to the finance committee that, hey, this is the police budget. It doesn't include any negotiated increases that will be happening next fiscal year. So you might want to think about adding, $50,000 to the budget. So what we've done this year, and the town council appreciates it, is all the budgets that you see here today for the clerical union, which is the only union under my authority that is not settled for next fiscal year. their anticipated raises are in the budgets already. So you're comparing what, you're not gonna have an article that's gonna add, 10,000 to this budget, 5,000 to that budget. It's already embedded in what you're seeing today. So it's a real apples to apples comparison from last year.
Could I just to add one thing to Steve's credit here, Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, saying what I've said about the COLAs, and Steve and I have had that conversation a million times over the years, but one
That's why
thing,
I
having
like it
seen,
better than you.
having seen, all kinds of municipal contracts across the state, oftentimes what you see, and you see it in the school department for sure, I know you see it in the school department, is the COLA in a CBA doesn't reflect anything close really to the true bottom line incremental wage increase. And even if we disagree, on the number in any given year, Steve's contracts have been pretty transparent in that regard. You see the COLA, and it tends to match up pretty well with the bottom line increase in the wage lines. Aside from the steps and the grades and the things that are sort of built into every union contract. It's not like you're seeing, I've seen contracts where you get a 1 or 1.5% COLA, but you end up with a 4 or 5%, bottom line wage increase. And so you see it in the schools, they'll come in with a 3% COLA, but their wage line somehow goes up 5.5%, 6%, even 4.5%, 5%. And so to sort of balance out what I alluded to earlier, there's some actual transparency in these collective bargaining agreements, and I think the negotiating team deserves some real credit for that, because I don't see that a lot across the state. It's much easier to report a lower COLA that actually results in a much larger bottom line wage increase, and so that's not what happens here on the town side.
Very good. Okay. Appreciate it. It's good insight. Anybody else from the subcommittee want to speak now, or I'll ask Kevin to begin the budgets. Anybody else want to speak? All right. So in the package of budgets that I sent you, there is, there's a spreadsheet that shows all the budgets, the summary. So, for a night like tonight, I kind of reference that. And so if you have that handy, or however you want to do it, but there's a file in there that has all the budgets. It's FY22 budgets to TC, meaning town council. That's the name of the file, and there's a date on it. So anyway, I think at this point, if you have that referenced, are you ready? Kevin, you're going to give a synopsis of each. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, have at it.
All right, very good. Thank you, everyone. I'll jump right in. As Evan had said, well, we have 23 budgets that we're going to be looking at tonight. The total increase for the 23 is $45,633, or a total of 1.35%. The first budget we'll look at tonight is the accounting budget. This budget, we're recommending an increase of $17,097 over the current year. This increase breaks down. $15,901 is coming from the tax levy. $1,196 is coming from a water and sewer transfer. This increase is all in personal services and is contractual and negotiated increases. The expenses are level funded. The main expenses within this budget is a line item equipment rental, $28,000. We combine our copy machine and high-speed printer bills. So all the machines that are in town hall and in the treasurer's office, they come in one bill, and we budget that under the accounting budget. The total budget for that line item is $28,000. We have a line item for professional services, $57,000, which is used for the town audit. We use a company, Powers and Sullivan. They're a local company. They're up at the head of the lake. They do a very good job for us. We have a postage line item for $8,000, which is used to mail the accounts payable checks. The total budget request is $443,709, with $422,998 coming from the tax levy and $20,711 from a water and sewer transfer.
Very good. Questions on this budget? Discussion. Doug?
Yeah, it looks like there's some big changes in like gradings and whatnot for a couple of the employees, and that resulted in big changes in the in their pay rate. Can you sort of talk us through that? Are they doing the same job and they just got regraded by your consultant, or?
No. What had happened is I had 2 long-term employees retire over the past couple of years. I had filled the positions, but I hadn't upgraded the people I hired internally, and I hadn't upgraded the positions yet, and I just got around to it this year. So the people were working out of classification. This is just the bump up to show what they were actually getting paid from working out of classification.
Just to let the public know that I'll ask him the same questions that we ask everybody else coming in.
Yeah, so a couple of those folks went from like, lane 6 to lane 9 or lane 6
Correct.
to lane 8.
Right.
And that was, people that work in town, you're saying that it went from job A to your job, and it's a different level, different classification.
Exactly.
Okay, I had a similar question, so, okay.
Okay.
Anybody else on that? Yeah, Doug, Dennis, you're muted. Dan, I do see your hand up, so stand by.
A general comment, I'd like to see the budgets, even though they're small, reflect in their negative amounts for the items that we don't use a lot of money, even though it may be $1,000 item. Let's reduce it down to $100. And what I'm trying to do is all the money that comes back at the end of the year, even though it's in there is hopefully gravy for unseen conditions. I'd rather see the unseen condition coming as a reserve fund transfer to highlight it, and not just being able to use all this float money in here in all the budgets, and hopefully pay for the wage increases by zeroing out some of these items that we don't use or don't even come near. So that's just a general comment on all of them.
Can I jump in on that, Jim?
Yep, Kevin, go ahead.
I think that's something Steve and I have been working with the department heads very closely over the past several years. And, I think we've said it quite a few times that we don't want to penalize departments for not spending their money. The last thing you want to do is start cutting some of the budgets, because what will happen is if you cut, say there's a $2,000 line item and the people spend $500 the past couple of years. If you cut them back $1,000, I'm pretty confident that most department heads will go on a spending spree or try to spend every single dollar that they have in their budget. That's something Steve and I have worked very closely with the department heads to say, we're not looking to penalize you. It's there if you need it. If you don't need it, it just closes out at the end of the year, and it becomes part of our free cash number. And, our free cash number has been pretty healthy the past couple of years. And, fortunate for us, we use it when we need it, but hopefully we don't have to. Steve, I don't know if you.
I know, I agree completely with Kevin. I think we do look for trends. If something's been zero for 3-4 years in a row, then maybe we'll get, we get rid of it, and you'll see that in some other budgets that are coming forward to today. In most of these, though, there aren't a lot of trends here. And I would say this fiscal year is not one that we should be measuring on, because this was kind of a strange one. So, but we do take your comment, Dennis, and we'll look at that. But I do agree with Kevin. Our philosophy has been, don't be afraid, guys. Don't spend stuff that you think will take it away. It adds back to free cash, and run your department prudently.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, so my question, actually, I had 2 questions, and one of them just got answered on the people. But I was just curious, Kevin, if you've you've got the $1,500 for temporary help. So is that something that you have used recently? Is that one of those quote trends that you've always spent a little bit of money on? Or is that something that you've been able to avoid spending and return back to the general revenue?
I try to turn it back to general revenue. I keep it just in case we run into a problem where, take the end of the year, if I need overtime to get the 1099s printed and get them out, if there's any issue with that. It's pretty much it's an overtime that in case my group needs overtime for some reason or another, I have a little bit of funds there.
Yeah.
But,
I'm not questioning and saying you ought to lower it. I'm just curious how much you've used it.
I've used it a little bit last year because the staff that I had was not as senior as it has in the past. So we've used a little bit of it, but not much.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Jim.
Somebody else had their hand up, but they put it down. Is everybody else set on this? Okay. Kevin, thank you. Next.
Yep, next budget is the treasurer's budget. We are recommending that this budget be increased $6,704. This increase is all in personal services and is contractual and negotiated increases. The expenses are level funded. Major expenses within this budget, line item for $13,000 for tax title, which is used for attorney's fees and land court costs. There's a line item for bank charges, $7,500, which is used to maintain the town's bank accounts and cost for checks. Those two items, usually not too much activity the first half of the year. Those are usually spent, if they are spent, in the second half of the year. We also collect revenue within this department from tax title. Last year, we collected almost $100,000. Fiscal 19, we collected $143,000. Total budget request for the treasurer's office is $226,633.
Excuse me, any discussion? Comments? Seeing none. Thank you.
Next budget is the legal budget. We are recommending that this increase over last year of $3,508. This increase, again, is all in personal services and is for contractual and negotiated increases. The expense fund are level funded. The major expenses within this budget, there is a line item outside professional services, $60,000, which is used for expert witnesses or services, environmental attorney, and the such. Total budget request is $191,185.
Very good. Legal, any comments? No long discussion about the library and electronic or books or anything? I mean, geez,
I gave up.
move on.
Judicata. Already settled.
Next budget is the tax collector's budget. We're recommending an increase to this budget of $7,619. This increase breaks down $5,494 to the tax levy, $2,125 to a water and sewer transfer. Again, this is all in personal services and is for contractual and negotiated increases. Expenses are level funded. Main expenses within this budget, $5,200 for printing and binding, which is used for the preliminary and actual tax bills to print them. The postage line item, $32,500, which is used to mail the tax bills. We mail approximately 65,000 bills a year out of the collector's office. Total budget request is $289,810, with $231,333 coming from tax levy and $58,477 coming from a water and sewer transfer.
Comments? Okay,
Next budget is the assessors budget. We're recommending a decrease to this budget over the current year of $5,577. This breaks down, there is an increase to personal services of $6,748, which is for contractual and negotiated increases. There is a decrease under contractual services. The big decrease there, $12,000, is under professional services. The reason for the decrease, in fiscal 22, we have is a property revaluation certification year with the Department of Revenue. This is more extensive than our normal year. The revalue certification is every 5 years. We will be hiring outside help for that. And the cost of that outside help is going to run approximately $83,000, and we will be doing a special article at town meeting. So we were able to decrease the budget a little bit, but we will be doing an article for the more extensive services that we will need to do to get the recertification done. Total budget request for 2022 is $239,319.
All right, any comments on that? So, yep, Doug Butler, I think.
Yeah, I'm confused. Why are we doing something that comes up every 5 years as an article versus just budgeting for it every 5 years?
It breaks it out, and it's something that I felt should have been broken out and not included as a regular portion of the budget where this is something unusual. We've done it.
Something that's
We've done
every
it.
5 years?
We've done it in the past as a special article.
Yeah, I'm not sure that just because we did it, that's how we've always done it. I'm not sure that I love that. Do we do that for everything that's only that comes up every few years? I mean, it just feels to me like it should just go in his contractual services number and not like.
Was that 80,000 or so you said, Kevin? Was it 85,000?
Not a huge number.
83,000.
83,000. Yep. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. At this stage, you're saying it's going to be an article.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it's done. What's
Brian,
done
I
is
see your
done.
hand. Hold on.
If-
Okay, go ahead,
And-
Doug.
Oh, it's sort of what's done is done around this, but my feeling is like this feels like it, I'm sure we're gonna, if I'm so honored to still be on this committee in 5 years, and we've probably had this conversation before, so.
When you break something out as a special article, it can only be used for that specific purpose. Sometimes when you bury something in a budget, even though it goes into that line item called professional services,
Oh, you could use it for something else.
you could use it for some other type of professional services. So I'd be more apt to use it with you narrow the scope when you put it in an article.
Okay,
It also is helpful if it fell for some reason over fiscal years. We just keep the article open and can use it the next fiscal year. As opposed, if it's in the budget, we'll have to close it out unless we encumber that, and I hate that. So
what happens if not that it could, what happens if it gets voted down?
That
Come
wouldn't be
back to
good.
see us for a transfer.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Thanks for the idea.
So just a reminder, some people are raising their hand, which is fine. I see it and I take care of it. And you have a little electronic raising of one's hand. So either one works. I saw Brian, you had a hand up.
Yep. So my question is, how many, Kevin, this is specifically to you, how many items like this do we have that come up only periodically like this? And is there a general procedure to it? And is this the way we do it? Or is this a one-off?
This is the one-off that comes to mind. And, this is the way we've handled it in the past. And, but by doing it as an article, like I said, it just narrows the scope on what the money can be used for.
Thank you, Mr. Gill.
All right, Dan, you had a hand up?
Yeah, so for very selfish reasons, I'm going to lobby for the 83,000 to be an article, because if I put it in my forecast under the accounting and then give it a 3% increase, I'll mess up everything. on my spreadsheet. So that's a very selfish reason not to put it there. But I think the other reasons have already been stated. The cost could transfer into another fiscal year, and with the article, that's not a big deal. With a budget like this, it's a bigger deal. And I think Kevin's point's valid, is that it can only be spent on that particular service. So, for those couple of reasons, and also I mentioned the union contracts, when they settle, we do that as an article, as another example, because it's often a one shot. So for those reasons, I kind of like it the way we're doing it.
Very good. I think,
Oh, Jim?
Yep.
I had one other thing.
Sure.
I was just curious about Morrison's increase in pay. It's over 6%. Is this a change in level or a step, or why the 6.1% increase in pay?
There's a step included in that.
Okay, thank you.
That's all we have on that. If no one else has a hand up, go ahead, Kevin.
Next budget is the town clerk's budget, recommending an increase to this budget of $11,034. This increase is all in personal services and is for contractual and negotiated increases. The expense portion of this budget is level funded. Main expenses within this budget, on the expense side, the printing and binding line item, $14,000. This is used to print town bylaws, code books, dog licenses. But a lot of the money is spent when they bind the old books that hold the birth, death, and marriage certificates. A lot of these go back to the early 1900s, and when you start binding up some of the books as they get older, they really need it, because some of the older books are falling apart. The total budget request for the town clerk's office is $237,939. I do want to point out that the town clerk brings in to her office approximately $70,000 a year in various licenses and permits and fees.
Questions? I have one question. It's good to see the town clerks getting a raise. I don't think that happened last year. But at the top of the budget, it's personal services and then elected officials. Elected officials, 7.33 increase. Are those the folks at the bottom of the spreadsheet that are, staff, or is that separate?
I'm sorry.
Elected.
So at the top of the spreadsheet, you
That's
have personal services of 4.14, and then elected officials
Right.
is 7.33.
Yep. Right.
So-
The personal services is the staff. The elected official follows the supervisory scale, and is that 7.33 is the COLA plus a step.
Okay, so yeah, so the elected official is the town clerk. Okay, understand. Thanks. Got it.
And actually, statutorily, if an elected official receives a raise in the November town meeting or the regular town meeting, it has to be, or excuse me, in a special town meeting, it's got to be by a 2/3 margin versus a majority in the regular town meeting. Kind of an interesting quirk of the law.
I don't see anybody's hand up. Thank you. Next.
Sorry, Doug, have a question?
Yeah, sorry. What happened with postage? It looked like it was a crazy number.
Postage. That
Mail-in ballots.
Oh, mail-in ballots. Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
There you go.
absentee ballots.
Absentee.
Ah, all right. So by the way, should we think we should budget for that?
Well, we did get, a presidential election usually sees quite a few more absentee ballots than regular years. We only see that every 4 years, thankfully. And also we are getting reimbursement, and we already received reimbursement for some postage, for some additional postage, because of all the mail-in ballots of almost $4,000. That's not reflected in that number.
Okay. I want to know how the $965 comes in for telephone exactly the same every year.
Counting.
Contract item.
That's Kevin's magic.
Don, I believe you have a question?
Right, so Kevin, on the postage,
Yes.
wouldn't that fit better in the elections budget rather than?
Some of it does come out of that budget also. This year was an extraordinary year, and they ended up using pretty much postage in both areas for that office. Where that office handles both the town clerk and the election and registration. So with regards to postage for absentee ballots, some money did come out of both of those budgets, along with voter registrations that were mailed out. So.
Okay, Don, you seem good. Anyone else? Thank you. Next, Kevin.
Next budget is the election and registration budget. We are recommending level funding. Main expenses within this budget, the personal services line item, $17,100, which is used for the census workers. Under contractual, there's a professional services line item. We use a company called LHS. We pay for out of this line item. They come in and they help us with the census mailing, the printing of the ballots, and also maintenance on the voting machines. There's a line item for postage, $6,500, which is also used for the absentee ballots. So depending on how extensive the absentee ballots are, sometimes it overflows from one budget to the other. Total budget request is $37,700.
Comments? Next.
Next budget is the election budget, election expense budget. We are requesting a decrease of $24,050 over last year. The reason for this decrease, in the current year, fiscal 2021, we had 3 elections. In fiscal 22, we're only budgeted 1 election, which is the local election. The cost of 1 election is approximately $12,925. And that is what the budget request is for fiscal 22.
Comments? Okay.
Next budget is the Finance Committee budget. We are requesting level funding. Main expenses within this budget is the cost to print the town's recommendation book, $2,800. The dues and membership line item, $3,400, which is the Finance Committee's portion of the MMA dues. I do want to point out the printing of the recommendation book for town meeting. Last couple of years, the transfer hasn't been done. We've gone to doing that, manufacturing the recommendation book in-house. So there really hasn't been much cost or any cost sent over to the Finance Committee for that. And there probably should have been for some paper and some time involved for doing that in-house, where overall it's a cost savings from what it used to be, but we're thinking level funding is what we're looking for this year.
Okay. Comments?
I just want to say that Kevin wanted to cut that budget, but I didn't.
Yeah, and I was trying to understand with a new chairperson why the budget wouldn't have gone up. So we can talk
We
about
know
that
how
later.
you feel, Jim, we know.
Next.
Next budget is the Conservation Commission budget. This budget, we're recommending a total increase of $1,470. There is an increase in the available fund offset of $1,500, a decrease of the tax levy of $30. The available funds are the wetland filing fees that are collected from the Conservation Commission for people that come in and apply for an application before them. We increased that from $3,000 to $4,500. And that was based on the amount of money in that account. This department consists of 2 people, each working 10 hours per week. Total budget request is $48,372, with $43,872 coming from tax levy and $4,500 from available funds.
Questions? Very good.
All set?
Yep.
Next budget is the planning board budget. We are recommending level funding. Total budget request is $12,975.
Any questions? Planning. Very good.
Next budget is the Board of Appeals budget. Again, we are recommending level funding. We budget this for 50 hearings per year. We do collect revenue from the Board of Appeals. Sometimes that revenue will jump around. In fiscal 2019, we collected just under $50,000, actually $48,612. In fiscal 20, we collected $11,036. In year to date, we're a little over $10,000. Total budget request is $27,800.
Any questions? Okay,
That's it.
thank you.
Next budget is the fire alarm budget. We're recommending that this budget be level funded. This department, they're in charge of basically doing changeovers on telephone poles when you'll see the double poles out there that, you know, they come in and they'll move some of the wires around to get rid of the double pole. They also fix and replace the aging traffic signals, and they also work on the town's dispatch equipment. This budget request for fiscal 2022 is $63,515. I do want to point out that they do collect revenue for master boxes that are at private companies. That we do maintain those. There is a yearly fee that we charge the customer, $225 a year, and we collect approximately $30,000 a year for those boxes.
All right, Dan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Kevin, I'm curious about one thing.
Sure.
On the personal services.
Yep.
You've got 63,515. But it breaks down to actually 42,000 for personal services and then
Right.
contractual and so forth.
Yep.
What you don't have is who is that personal service being, who's delivering that personal services. Unlike other budgets, you actually list the people who are
Right.
involved, but you don't have it here. I'm just curious what's up.
Yep. That's the way this budget has been handled in the past. The person that heads up this department is Randy Hudson. He's a captain at the fire department, and he has a crew from the fire department. There's like 2 or 3 people that work with him that handle this, and they do this work in their off hours.
Oh, so if you listed those people, they have varying hours, so you really can't, you can list the 3 or 4 people, but how much each one receives in compensation is going to vary depending upon who's working those off hours and who's not.
Right. And usually a lot of times it's as needed too. So if say there's a storm and lightning hits a telephone pole and knocks out a street light, and it has to be reset, they would go out and reset it. So it's really a lot of times you don't know when and how much they're going to have to work.
Right. So it's just, dumb luck that in 2020, the actual spend was only $100 less than the budget.
A lot of times they do planned maintenance also. I'm sorry. It isn't just for emergencies. There's also planned maintenance involved with it too.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Dawn.
Right, yeah, so I was just, we discussed this in the subcommittee, and this are incremental payments to people who are folks who were salaried elsewhere in the town budget was my understanding, so. So, you know, I just wanted to let you know, we did cover this, and you know, it makes sense, the approach that they're taking to provide these services, so.
Very good, Don. Thank you. And Stefan, I think you had a question? Excuse me.
Yeah, along the same lines, I was just curious if there's any, I guess, visibility into what those incremental rates are for these.
Yes, I did ask for a rate sheet. So it isn't their rates that they're getting paid at the fire department. It's less than that. It's usually like what a detail rate would be for a police or fire officer.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody else good? Thank you. Next, Kevin.
Next budget is the emergency management budget. We're requesting an increase to this budget of $1,236. This increase is all in personal services and is for negotiated salary increase. Main expenses within this budget under contractual services is a $10,000 line item for the emergency operating center, which is at the public safety building. And this is used to upgrade, service, or maintain the equipment at the control center. And there's a $16,000 line item for the notification system, which is basically the reverse 911 in case of emergency. Residents in Wakefield can be notified. The total budget request is $75,436. I do want to give a shout out to Tom Walsh, who handles this department. He's been doing a great job with the COVID response and all the work that comes along with it.
I do too, and you know, Tom is working well more than what is covered under this budget because of the time that we're in, and all of that extra time is covered under the FEMA and that. So I couldn't squeeze all that work out of him for that same salary as much as I tried. No, it's done a great job, really a godsend, and has gotten us a lot of money back on things that are amazing through FEMA. It's got great connections.
Very good. I don't see any questions. Okay. Thank you.
Next budget is the inspectional services department, or the building department, some may call it. Recommending this budget be increased $15,063. Again, this is all in personal services and is contractual and negotiated increases. The expense portion is level funded. I do want to point out that we do bring in quite a bit of revenue from the building department or inspectional services. In fiscal 19 and fiscal 20. 19, it was just under $1 million we brought in this department. In fiscal 20, it was a little over $1 million. Current year to date, fiscal 21, they are very busy. We've collected approximately $300,000 through half the year. It's not as much as the previous years, but I think they're busier now that we haven't seen the big one or two developments that we have in the past couple of years, at least through the first half of the year. The total budget request for fiscal 2022 is $384,029.
Very good. Dan, you have a question?
Yeah, so maybe this question is more for Steve. You know, Jack retired, and I remember the whole discussion about a year ago about his replacement, and that I thought you had said that we'd replace him and we'd have a reduction in the personal services side of this budget. Am I remembering that incorrectly? Because this one's going up.
Yeah, well, I think the difference here is that we pulled out of Linfield, so we're not sharing those positions anymore.
That's
So,
right.
Had we stayed in that, you know, you would have come in at a lower grade, and that would have happened. But For a lot of reasons, we found it, and mainly because we're way too busy and it wasn't worth it for us. We found that pulling out was the better deal.
Yeah, that's right. I now remember the pullout. That's why I was gonna, okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Right, so my only comment really would be along the same lines. The gentleman that was hired, or the person that's hired, is at a higher rate than Jack was, it looks like, correct?
Not all in. Remember, you had the big offset from Linfield before, so that is not necessarily true.
All right, salary 21, salary 22, there's a 6% increase for the commission, the building commissioner. That's apples to apples, it looks like. There's nothing there from
Well,
Linfield.
yeah, Ben started, he's on the getting an increase because he's going up a step on his unit, on his union. And 2021 would have had more, Linfield would have been different. So I think, what did you do? Back out what Wakefield's portion would have been on that, Kevin?
Correct.
Yeah. So 2021 does not account for Linfield at all on this sheet.
Yep. Evan.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to weigh in on this because irrespective of whether you're looking at an apples to apples comparison there, I don't know. But even if the new guy were in at a higher rate than Jack, I think there's grounds for that anyway. That job market, I mean, just like in your jobs in the private sector, there is sort of salary competition. It's sort of geographically centric, but there's still some salary competition in terms of getting the best people in a job like building commissioner. It's really sort of a niche profession. And I just know going through it 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that hiring a building commissioner and getting a good one who's qualified is really difficult. And so as much as I'm a stickler when it comes to costs, and especially personnel costs, in a position like this, sometimes the market demands that you pay a little more to get the talent that you're looking for. And so I think there are less examples like that in government as there are in the private sector usually. But this is one where I think that sort of paradigm exists, where you really got to sort of pay a little bit more for talent, and it's usually worth it in the long run. That's my 2 cents.
Very good, thank you. Dan, you had a hand up.
Yeah, so I went back to the previous budget. I pulled it up from a year ago. And we were paying Jack in 2020, $147,500. So there was a substantial decrease from 147 to 110 for fiscal year 2021. That's what I'm remembering. So it was there, but it happened between 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
So we are paying this gentleman less.
Right, you had 2 communities, so we got a benefit.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you. Next.
Next budget is the Council on Aging budget. We are recommending that this budget be increased $6,440. This, again, increases all in personal services and is for contractual and negotiated increases. Main expenses within this budget, the oil and additives, which is the gas for the senior van, $7,800. And there's a line item for the Mystic Valley Services, which is used for Meals on Wheels and in-home care as needed. Total budget request is $260,320.
Comments? Yep. Go ahead.
As far as oil and stuff, didn't we get a new van to replace that van that you couldn't step in and out of? So shouldn't all those expenses be going down?
I think they have 2 vans right now, actually. They use 2 vans. So what expenses are you looking for?
I'm looking, seeing we have a new big van. Why? That was the reason that the expenses were up high before, because that was always breaking down. Because of the step on it didn't work that well. So they got a new one. So I figured that those expenses should be going down for maintenance.
You're looking at the at different line items? What page are you on? Page materials and supplies, motor vehicle parts and what have you?
Yeah.
Well, again, that is, I think we'll definitely look at that. They turn it in at the end of the year, as we said. There probably is a trend on that one that we could lower that a little bit. But, you look at this year, oil additives, it's $559 through the first half of the fiscal year. Obviously, we're not driving people a lot of places this year, so we're not spending a lot of money there. So tires and the other things are down. So I think you'll see a lot of supplies being down here too, but that's a good point for us to look at next year, Dennis, because there certainly seems to be a trend in that regard.
Okay.
So I'm with you.
Good. Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Next, Kevin. Oh,
right.
wait a minute. Doug, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess that's my question, thinking about the Council on Aging and sort of what they're spending money on and, what we're seeing. I guess it's obviously this year is going to come in way under budget for them. But do we think we're going back to that sort of high level of spending again, or do we think, again, walk me through what they actually spend money on? Is it, is it just driving people around, or is it the senior center?
Well, they have a lot of events at the senior center, and you're getting closer every year, Doug, that you might want to attend any of them. And
I got
obviously,
my AAP card last year too, they sent me that.
frankly, we are not driving as much as we used to be because of what's going on. But there are a lot of events there. They serve congregate meals to people. They have, piano players. They have all of these events that come in every week, big St. Patrick's Day parties, things
Right,
like
but they're not doing those now, and the question
They're not doing
is,
those now. Yeah.
right, and the question is, are they doing, again, so this,
So you want to know what they're doing this year?
yeah, I want to know what, what's Judy doing this year?
Right. She's doing a hell of a lot to help with all of the COVID and the vaccine clinics, but they are actually, they're actually either making field trips to visit people or checking in on them on the phone, their staff and things like that. So they're keeping our elder community connected, right?
Okay.
A lot of that is going out door to door even, so they're doing a great job, in my humble opinion.
Sure.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you.
Next budget is the recreation budget. We are requesting an increase of this budget of $6,746 over last year. Again, this increase is all in personal services and is for contractual and negotiated increases. The only thing that is in this budget is the personal services. Any expenses for this budget would be paid for out of the revolving account for the recreational programs and activities. In fiscal 2020, generated just under $250,000 in revenues. We expended out of that account to put on the programs $238,000. In fiscal 21 year to date, we collected just under $150,000. We've expended $75,000. Some of those expenditures were reimbursements for the fees because some of the programs were canceled due to the COVID. The total budget request is $116,682.
All right. Any questions? Very good.
Next budget is the veterans budget. We're requesting an increase of $3,164 over last year. There was a small increase in personal services, $727, which is a contractual and negotiated increase for a part-time employee. In the contracted services, the increase is $3,437. It's all in the professional services line item. And this is to what we pay to Melrose, where we have an agreement and we share employees between Melrose and Wakefield and Saugus. So to be part of the municipal agreement, we spend approximately $53,435 a year to be part of that program. And with that, It covers a portion of the director's salary and a veteran service officer that is dedicated specifically for Wakefield. We were also able to decrease the Memorial Day line item, $1,000. Talking with Karen Burke on this, that she had mentioned that the state now is picking up a portion of the grave flags that they do on Memorial Day, so they were able to decrease that line item a little bit. But the main expense within this budget, the recipient line item, $170,000, which is the veterans benefits that we give out directly. We did over 130,000 last year. Speaking with Karen about, because the numbers through half the year were down a little bit, but she had mentioned that she's seeing an uptick over in Melrose, so she's thinking that the same is going to happen here in Wakefield due to COVID, that they haven't been able to do as much outreach as they would like to do. So hopefully that will start picking up again. I do want to note that for the recipient money that we do spend, the state does reimburse the town up to 75% of those funds. And for fiscal 21, we anticipate a reimbursement from the state of approximately $100,000. The total budget request for the veterans is $249,601.
Okay, no comments? Doug?
Sure. What, remind me again, you said you reduced the Memorial Day. What are those things for, Memorial Day and Veterans Day?
I'm sorry?
What
The
are
Memorial-
is it for like doing flags or something like that?
Yeah, grave
Memorial
flags.
Day?
The state is picking up a portion of the grave flags that they put down on Memorial Day.
Okay. And then how did we save $200 on our flags for Veterans Day?
Where are you looking?
Looks like we spent $1,300 versus $1,500. Line 27.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it just came in under budget, I guess, for the
Yeah,
expense.
on the budget.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, they're very round numbers, so I was just assuming that like, it's just, I don't know what it is.
Payment under budget, Doug. Agree, disagree? Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm still trying to understand those $4,000 that goes, are they, help me understand it again. What's the cost there?
For what?
For Veterans Day and Memorial Day, what are the costs? What are you spending the money on?
Wreaths, flags, tent rentals, when we have the tent rentals, things like that. Wreaths, the flowers. They decorate every grave in the cemetery, veteran cemetery.
Okay, so that's, and so you didn't spend the money last year, obviously, because of COVID, and then,
Right.
well, last year you spent it on Veterans Day, and you didn't
Right.
spend it in 2020, which is weird.
Karen has mentioned that sometimes things are donated also. That if things are donated, they
It's
don't have
just
to.
like,
Right.
felt like something that would just be sort of clearly bypassed that nobody pay attention to, so I just raised it, so.
Yeah, this Memorial Day, I think they really just did a virtual service and maybe had things donated. That's why you see a 0 there.
Okay.
Very good. Next budget.
Next budget is the streetlight budget. We are requesting level funding. This funds for approximately 2,300 streetlights, of which 1,800 are in residential neighborhoods. Total budget request is $188,131.
Dan,
Next,
excuse me, Dan? Mute. Dan muted.
Okay, that's better. So I'm curious, I mean, my light bill goes up every year. is this a case where we negotiate with the light department, 188, 131, and they just say, okay, we're fine with that?
A few years ago, they replaced, I think it used to be around 223,000, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, in that ballpark.
That's correct.
And a few years ago, they went to some lower cost bulbs, I guess, and fixtures. And and we also agreed to a pilot program that this is the last year of the pilot program agreement. And that was kind of all wrapped up in the same package. Remember the light department came to FinCom, we had that discussion, so.
Yep.
The agreement is when they did the capital program, replacing the bulbs and replacing the fixtures, that once that capital expenditure was amortized, that this streetlight bill would come down more as well. And I think next year, fiscal year 23 is going to be a year we're going to do a lot more of negotiation here on both the pilot program and this.
Yeah, I guess I'm just surprised it hasn't gone up.
Oh, that was the
Yeah,
agreement. They were going to keep it level.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a fixed, it's like a fixed rate contract. It's a flat rate per
Yeah.
bulb, per light.
Right, so like as a cable company, for example, so when at the 2023, they're gonna give us a 50% increase?
No, I think it would come down.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, well, that's what they've stated. That
All
once they amortize the capital expenditure, it's going to come down. Remember I said that, Dan, write it down.
okay, I'll note it. Thank you.
He's gonna lower the pilot as well in conjunction, so don't
No,
worry.
I'm not lowering the pilot. You know that.
Yeah, I'll put a for sale sign up.
All right, next. Thank you.
Next budget is the Historical Commission budget. We are requesting level funding. Main expenses within this budget, $1,030 for printing, which is used to advertise their meetings. $500 for other materials and supplies, which is used to for signage repair and any upgrades that they need to do. Total budget request is $2,000.
Joe?
Oh, no comment.
Joe's involved in the Historical Commission through people he knows.
Yes.
Okay, next,
Set.
thank you.
Next budget is the unemployment budget. We're requesting that this budget be level funded. This budget is split $25,000 for the town unemployment, $50,000 for the school unemployment. Total budget request is $75,000. I do want to point out that, as you can see on the budget expended through the first half of the year, we've only spent a little over $1,700. Right now, we are dealing with a lot of unemployment fraud, and a lot of the bills that have come in are all being contested. So we haven't paid a bill. I think we're going back to April of last year. So
Yeah, actually, we did not receive a bill because municipal unemployment is pay as you go. So whenever someone puts a claim in, we pay our portion of the claim. Whereas, the business world, you pay a percentage of salary, so that goes in. We did not receive a bill from the state of Massachusetts, I think, until late August. So we didn't receive a bill in March, April, May, June, or July until late August for everything. And it was loaded with frauds and claims that we had no idea of. So we're contesting everything. The state's position used to be pay us, and when we get that money back, we'll make sure we make you whole. Well, we're not going to play that game with them this year because I don't trust them, number one. And number two, our personnel weren't laid off. They didn't get any money. Someone used their name because I went through the entire list when they come in, and boy, I didn't know that we we hired we fired so-and-so. She's here every day. How did this happen? So it's really as rampant as it's made out to be in the press. It's horrible. So that'd be an interesting dynamic when it comes down.
Okay, Don, do you have a question?
So Steve, we discussed this a little bit at the subcommittee meeting. I believe there were furloughs at the school department, but those would be covered under the CARES Act
Yes,
fund.
yeah, yes, I should have mentioned that. So the furloughs of mainly aides, paraprofessionals, things like that. Those are covered under the CARES Act, and we're accounting for those and putting those in as well. And actually have been reimbursed for them. And we don't have to pay the state until, I think, the end of March. So I'm kind of holding on to that until then. Why pay them early? We'll get the float.
Very good, Don. Thank you.
Good point. I should have brought that up. Thank you.
Anybody else? Next line item.
Next budget is the reserve fund budget. We are requesting level funding. This budget is used for unforeseen, unbudgeted, or under budgeted expenses or emergencies. The total budget request for 2022 is $300,000. I do want to just give you an update. There are a couple of items as we stand right now that we will be coming for a reserve fund later this fiscal year. We usually do them all in June. The two items that I'm looking at right now is the workers' comp budget. And the second one is under vocational schools for additional students up at Essex North.
Okay. Dan, I know you had dropped a note. You have comment, questions? Dan, we can't hear you, Dan.
Sorry. So for everybody else's benefit, when I went through the reserve fund, I started looking at the history of the reserve fund. And in 2006, it was $250,000 and represented 0.42% of our total budget. And we increased it in 2014 to $300,000. And that was a move that made it from 0.33% of our total budget to 0.4%. So if we leave it at 300,000 for fiscal year 22, it comes in at something less than 0.29% of our total budget. So it's even less than where we were when we raised it in 2014. I don't think we actually have a policy in terms of what the reserve fund ought to be. But it seems to me if we've now have it down at the point where it's only 0.29% of our total spend, that just feels too tight. And so my thinking is that this should be a higher number, maybe get back up to 0.4% of the total budget, which would be about $400,000. But as we spend more in our total budget, I gotta believe that, knock on wood, we haven't had to spend 300,000 like last year, but we could this year. We could spend more than that. And can we have a reserve fund to reserve fund transfer? I don't think so. So I'm a little bit worried about the size of this budget. And I sent a note to Steve and Kevin, CC Jim and Doug, but I'm just wondering if Kevin and Steve, if you have any thoughts regarding my note, and do you think town council would be receptive to giving us a little bit of a bump in light of the fact that our budget is now over $100 million?
I'll jump in. We actually, in our financial policies, we do have a reserve policy. It's on page 8. The town shall maintain a reserve fund balance of between 0.5% and 1% general fund reserves, less debt exclusions in Chapter 78. So we are certainly below that amount. Let me look at this. I think I'm not against looking at increasing this a little bit, Dan. Frankly, it's a catch-all. What we have done in the past, however, is that when we know that we have a shortfall in an account, we have drawn down from free cash in the Springtown meeting. So we've kind of covered it that way. We've done a few of those with usually fire department overtime or things like that we've known about that have come through. So Kevin and I look at that, maybe we stagger that in and go like 350 and then look at it that way. I think you were looking at for 100. So that's my initial thought on it. And, Kevin and I really haven't had a chance to sit down, and I have not mentioned this to town council, but I'm happy to kind of look at that and come to a consensus and move that forward.
Yeah, so if you did the math, taking the total spend minus the couple of items you mentioned, I'd be interested to know what that 0.5% number turned out
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah.
Because I want to stay within policy.
Right. Right.
Hey, Joe, just 1 second. Evan had his hand up.
So, Steve, do you have, and I'm putting you on the spot a bit, but, or Kevin, do you have in the same policy that I don't know how old it is. I feel like we went over one recently,
Yeah.
but do you have a sort of a percentage baseline guidance with respect to total reserve cash accounts? So not just the reserve fund, but free cash, stabilization, and other things. What's the guideline there? And are we in compliance with that?
Yeah, we're certainly in compliance with free cash. We are, we have been at the high end of that. It's between 2% and 8% of think of the general fund operating revenue. On stabilization, we're looking at about 3% when we're exactly there right now. So we have been in compliance with our reserves there in other areas. This one, we've been a little bit below, 0.5 and what we were 0.42 or something before. So I think this does merit taking a look at it personally.
I'm sure it merits taking a look at, but I also think it all balances out if everything's sort of meeting your guidelines in that respect. I think, not that I want to spar with Dan on anything that comes before this committee, but I think that there's some level of I don't want to call it arbitrary, but I think, when we take a snapshot look at a reserve fund versus our free cash balance versus other reserve cash balances, that I think when DOR guidance specifically, which a lot of these policies are based on, when it gets into, your reserve fund should be X percentage of your total spend or your total appropriation. Like it seems more productive to talk about your total cash reserve balance as a percentage of those numbers. You know what I mean? And so I'm not particularly alarmed by keeping the reserve fund level. But that being said, it's always worth looking at. That's what we do here. But I would just say I'm not particularly concerned about it, especially if our free cash goals are still sort of surpassing the minimum thresholds that the policies.
They were before. We're a
Right.
little bit down at the lower end now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that I think Dan will agree. My thinking, when I think of reserves, I don't particularly think of the reserve fund as a reserve. I think of the other two major accounts personally. And I like to see that at around 10% of our operating budget. That makes me comfortable. But that's just me. I don't know if Dan, that makes him comfortable or not.
Well, since you brought it up, I'm looking at my forecast spreadsheet, and I have a line item for reserves as a percentage of budget, and I'm just using free cash and stabilization. And at the end of 22, I'm projecting 7.8%, not 10. By 2025, it's down to 5.5%, and then it starts going back up again.
And those
So-
projections are based on our all revenue coming in at where we project and no department returning any money. So that's kind of a worst case scenario.
Actually, I do have,
Unless you changed it.
yeah, I've got some stuff coming in a little bit. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. There's going to be a few bucks that come in. But it's not going to make up, I mean, it's down to 6.3 million. And we'd have to be about 12 million to get back to 10% by the time we get to 2025. So we are going to be, our reserves will get below the 10% threshold unless we did some serious cuts in services.
But then, so I also always wondered, what's the 10% threshold based on? That's a common number that's thrown out. And so I wonder, like, is that arbitrary? Like, I've never seen some real basis for those types of numbers. And so maybe this isn't a conversation we have tonight, but you know, I hear you, but I also, I don't want to make decisions based on some arbitrary guidance that may not apply, especially in these very unique economic circumstances, to a town like Wakefield, because there are 351 cities and towns. And forgive me for assuming it's based on DOR guidance, but I think that's a pretty safe assumption. And I've always wondered, like, some of these, I've read these financial policies in multiple towns. They look similar in each town, and a lot of these thresholds are the same. And I always sort of wonder, where'd you get this number? Maybe it's well founded, and maybe it's just sort of something, you know, like Doug was alluding to earlier. Is it just something we've been doing for a long time, and so we keep doing it? You know, is that a goal that?
I wish.
Well, no. I mean, in terms of establishing the goal, not actually meeting it. But I hear you.
I think a lot of it is conversations with bond counsel, you know, with the rating agencies. I should say, when you go out for for them to rate you for bonds, you know, they look at your reserves, but they're looking at other items too. They're looking at where you are on your OPEB, where are you on your retirement. So there's a lot of things that mix together. They do like the fact that we have a written policy. They seem very pleased with where they stack up, you know, numerically in the numbers. So I imagine there's a lot of DOR best practice, you know, in these numbers, because you said they're all similar. So.
Yeah, I can give you one other perspective. I mean, one of the things that we talked about is the SPED budget, or a SPED reserve that we set aside.
Yeah.
And the basis of my calculations of that were on the fluctuations of what they spend from year to year and what is the standard deviation. And so when I look at our income and say, or expenses, I said, what kind of standard deviation do we get, you know, from year to year, both on income and expense? And how much a reserve would we need to cover some of those fluctuations, assuming both expenses went up and income went down, you know, local receipts obviously being the big nut. So actually, many years ago, I think I came across something in the 8 or 10% range, just looking at variations in income and expense.
Right. Joe, you had a question.
Yeah, more a comment. I'm not talking about the reserves all told. I want to talk about the reserve fund, which is used for potentially emergency issues. And, you know, back in 2019, we spent over 270,000. What would that be now? That would exceed 300,000 probably if there were emergencies, if we need to. I just think this is something that, seeing that I was there back in 2006 when we moved it up, I think it's time we move it up again, at least to the 350 figure, if not even the 400, because if there is an emergency issue, if there's something, you know, that happens that needs to be done, we got to have that ability to reach into this reserve fund and not use it like we have in the past, just for things. We do use it for things at the end of the year, but really this is for emergency issues, and that's what the money should be there for, and that's needs to be increased. Thank you.
All right. I know, Steve, you said you're going to look at it.
Yep.
We're not voting on things tonight. We'll all have another ability to discuss this. Doug, you have a question or comment? Doug, I can't.
Yes, sorry about that. I think that, you know, I get where both Dan and Evan are coming from. I think my thing would be looking at, you know, bond counsel and figuring out, like, what are they concerned with? And I guess that's the other thing. And this is where the finance side of it conflates with the legal side of it. Joe mentioned, like, if we have something where we need to, you know, spend money quickly, is the reserve fund really the only place we can tap from quickly versus our free cash or versus our stabilization funds? If it's only in the reserve fund, and then we should have. And by the way, I will say this as somebody who goes before, and Amy can attest to this as well, as somebody who goes before any number of auditors and whatnot, the one thing we want to make sure of is if we have a written down policy, that we abide by it. Like, there's nothing that pisses them all off more than when you wrote something down and then you didn't follow it. So I would say if we have something written down and it should be at least 50 basis points, then by golly, we better get 550 grand into that reserve fund.
As an auditor and compliance officer, I agree with Doug's assessment.
Anybody else?
I would
More-
just say,
More to come. Go ahead, Dan.
just to say that Doug's point, it is only for emergencies. It has to be unforeseen. And it is the emergency. It's the only source we have, because if that emergency happens after town meeting, now, you know, how are you going to get the money? It's called special town meeting because a boiler blew up. So yeah, it is emergency only.
Right, I mean, that's the only function we have. We can't have a town meeting, but we can meet in 2 or 3 days with notice, so.
Thank you. Good discussion, good dialogue. And again, more to come. Steve's going to look at it. I got it down as like an action follow-up item. So very good. Last budget, I think, Kevin?
Last budget is the professional medical budget. We are requesting level funding. This budget is used for pre-employment physicals, police and fire physicals, which can run up to $1,500 each. Mandatory Department of Transportation physicals for employees with CDL licenses. And if needed, return to work physicals for employees out injured. Total budget request is $10,850, with $8,350 coming from tax levy, $1,250 from the water, and $1,250 from the sewer enterprise accounts.
Any comments? Doug, is your hand up just because you're stretching still? Thank you. All right, no comments on that budget. So Kevin, that's the end of the list. Total increase 1.35, correct, from the
That's
spreadsheet?
correct. Yep.
Thank you. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, one last thing. The next group of budgets, we have 4 budgets that will be going before Town Council on February 8th. It will be the Town Council's budget, the IT budget, the police budget, and the library budget. I just want to mention that in case the liaisons haven't heard from those department heads, if they could maybe reach out. We also mentioned it to the department heads, just to make sure that those subcommittees do check in and hear those budgets from them before we meet with the town council.
very good. Yeah, I have the schedule. I was going to hit on that, so thank you.
Yep.
Steve put out a schedule that I might have got yesterday, but basically every 2 weeks we'll be meeting going forward, more or less. The next meeting is 2/11 for us. And so prior to that, the town council budget, the IT budget, the police budget, and library budget is going to be trying to go to town council. So whoever is the chairperson for those budgets, you do want to reach out, you do want to get a meeting scheduled, and you do want to get the meeting posted. And it's 7 days in advance for posting, Steve, is that it?
No, they need to be posted 48 hours in, at least a minimum of 48 hours. But if you can get them, get it over, because we got to set up the Zoom, so it takes a little bit of an extra time to do that. So, really, 4 days minimum is great for us.
When are those budgets going before town council, Kevin?
The 8th.
The 8th, February 8th.
On the 8th, Bill.
Right.
So that is, that's a tight schedule. Apologize for that, as we get kicked off tonight. And I'm going to send this schedule out to you all. So you'll see the schedule is laid out, showing what goes before town council and then comes to us basically in the same week. And the chairpersons are expected to attend the town council meeting for their particular budgets, the subcommittee chairs, and just give a brief overview or be available for questions for town council. So,
And if for some reason the chair of the subcommittee can't make the town council
Right.
meeting, or and other members can't as well, you can send in a written summation, and then Kevin or I can read it at the meeting as well, or a member of the town council. So I know it's a lot of nights out, so right now.
so again, I'll get the schedule out. you're all encouraged to reach out to the department heads and vice versa. They should be reaching out to you, start scheduling sessions, school committee, et cetera, the folks on the meeting, look into that. Any committee comments? Okay, again, the only comments I had was about the schedules that I've already covered. I will get those to you all. The spreadsheet that we referenced today, the summary spreadsheet, that'll continue to grow. Steve and Kevin continue to update that as things go before town council. It's a good reference. You'll always keep getting an update of that for those new folks. It's a tool to use. That was all I had in my pile. Steve, you have anything else?
No, thank you very much for your time, and congratulations, Mr. Chairman. You had full committee tonight.
Yes, I had taken attendance. I was going to mention that. We are 1 for 1 and going strong. Look forward to you all making as many meetings as you can. So any other comments? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion to adjourn by Dan, second by Joanne. All those in favor?
All right.
All right.
Aye. All right, we'll get the schedule out. Couple of weeks. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Good
And
night.
if anybody has any questions for Kevin or I, anytime, please send
Yes.
us.
Have a good evening.